Good morning. I'm super excited to have you all here. Thank you for getting out of bed. We were talking internally as a team, and I was just excited that this month was purpose, because I think there's a ton of opportunity right now for people that are trying to find that purpose, given all this craziness. So I'm excited for Garrett to share, and I'm just excited that we were able to kind of make this work. If you guys don't know me, my name is Megan. I am the host of Creative Mornings Orange County. So I think Katya's on. She's the co-host. A lot of the team is here. So I just want to thank them for all they do. Austin, Ian, Maria, Becky, you'll see them throughout multiple times, but they all do this volunteer. So this is just on their free time. Austin was talking to me at 10 p.m. last night, and he was like, I hate Megan so much, but they really love you guys and they really love this community. And so they're dedicating their time. And so super grateful for everything that they do. I just want to jump into some of our sponsors really quickly. So as I mentioned, we all are volunteer. We all do this for free. So our global sponsors are huge and our local sponsors are huge. I'm going to start with local. I'm going to let Becky, who is on our team, but she also is with TCG, kind of just talk to you guys a little bit about what TCG does and how they kind of support the chapter. So go ahead and take it away, Becky.
Thanks, Megan. Hey guys, I'm Becky Cote. I'm with TCG, the creative group. If you haven't heard of us before, we are a creative and marketing staffing firm. So we help companies grow as we fill positions for them, and we help candidates look for work as well. Right now, I just wanted to make a little plug. If you know anyone who's been affected in these unprecedented times and needs any sort of help, please do reach out. We can help with resume reviews, portfolio reviews, interview coaching tips, anything that you might need in the space like that. We're happy to be a resource. I can get you connected with a recruiter. And then also, if you happen to know of any companies that are hiring, please do send them my way. We would love to be a resource and help. Our goal right now is to be a beacon of hope to our community, help people get back to work, and help teams grow so that we're back stronger than ever. So I'll put my contact details in the chat box. You'll also see me on social, so feel free to shoot me a message. But yeah, thanks, Megan. Just wanted to give a little plug and see how we can help the community.
Yeah, I mean, TCG's been great. They've been with us since day one. So thanks again, Bex, for that. But local and global sponsors are really the only way that we get through this. I'm actually really excited because Kyle from Headquarters just popped on. Headquarters is in New York. So hi, Kyle. When I saw that Headquarters registered for our event, I was not as excited as I am now. I was like, oh, God. But it's just good, right? But so, yeah, TCG and then Dino Creative is actually Austin and Daniel, and they host a drink and draw. Obviously, since we can't come together, they're planning a virtual drink and draw sometime in June, maybe early July. But it's just a time where you guys can like come together with the community. You guys can all hang out. You don't have to be good at drawing. I go and I draw stick figures. But it's just a really great time to get to know people, to see what everybody's doing. So if you guys are looking for something to do, or if you want to do help in the virtual drink and draw, hit up Austin and Daniel. And so those are like global and local sponsors. And now I think I got everything. I'm really excited to introduce Garrett to you guys. Garrett is the speaker for this month. He worked in, like you saw in his bio, corporate America for a long time. And he hit kind of what he thought was it for him. You know, he was like, I made it. Like, this is my dream. And then realized that wasn't it. So he's gonna share a little bit about his journey, and he's gonna talk about the global theme of purpose and just his interpretation of it. So Garrett, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Awesome, thanks, Megan. Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining so bright and early and sharing your breakfast and your daughters with us. That's amazing. So, and the puppy dogs out there, that's gorgeous. Keep those coming. I know that right now it's kind of hard because we're all working from home and everyone wants to pretend to be professional. So I really enjoy the idea of like throwing that away and just being personable. So before we get started, the conversation's about purpose. And so that can tend to get cheesy. So if it gets cheesy on you, just throw up a hand or go black, or if you need to grab some tissues, it's all good. Okay. Because purpose is really important. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning. It drives action, behaviors, virtues, vices. It informs all the metrics behind everything that we do. And so, but what really is purpose? And how do you know when you found it? when I was a little kid, I thought I saw purpose in a skateboard magazine. One of my favorite pro skaters, Chad Muska, was featured in an article alongside like a raced out Acura Integra GSR with his girlfriend. And later that year, I saw him in the Shorties Fulfill the Dream video. And I remember thinking at the time as like a little kid, like, boom, there it is, fulfill the dream. Get paid to do something you love, and then find someone to share all that with. And for me, that was purpose right there in the title of that skate video, fulfill the dream, which I thought was pretty cool for a 15-year-old. And we hear a lot of those sentiments echoed everywhere. Love what you do, follow your heart, follow your passion. If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And these sentiments aren't wrong. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. And I'm working out of a WeWork this morning so I could get nice broadband Wi-Fi so I wasn't delayed on here. And so the logo when I walk in every day is this big mural that says, love what you do. So every day I walk by that on my way into work. Those ideas of following your heart, following your passion. And if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And all of those sentiments aren't wrong. And I've seen a lot of people start off doing what they love and go from making minimum wage to well into the six figures. Some of them teaching dance or doing music tutorials, while others are sharing cartoons or even massage therapists. And so it's possible, if you stick with it for a decade, to go from minimum wage to six figures if you love what you do. And if you don't love what you do, you're going to be jumping around a whole heck of a lot. And sometimes we want to figure out before we spend a decade doing the wrong thing, maybe we don't have one talent or skill like Tiger Woods. Maybe we have a few divergent interests. The science of finding purpose is simple. You create a hypothesis, you run an experiment, and then you confirm or deny your hypothesis. I thought this would be a fun job. I applied, I got the job, I hated it, on to the next thing. And in his book, Range, for all the creatives out there that have multiple diverging interests, David Epstein kind of creates an argument through this book that range is actually in the new era that we live in now that's going to set you apart. And we don't find our purpose in theory, but in practice. And my own scientific personal process to find purpose led me to have over 20 different job titles in a spread of 5 different industries in a short period of 27 years. And that process of elimination made it really simple for me to fill in the E-Key guide chart. If you've ever taken a look at that, pull it up. It's pretty interesting. But through that process of elimination, I landed at Equinox, working my way up from an entry-level position to regional manager. At the end of it, I was there seeing 7 locations and a team of over 100 people for the spa department. For me, it was a dream job because I was responsible for recruiting, hiring, training, and developing my team. And I had the freedom to be able to do anything that I thought was see fit to help benefit the members there and my team members. So it was really exciting to be creating systems and processes. And we really had strong metrics. So you got to know if you were doing a good job or not. And my department was responsible for adding 12% revenue from year to year, month over month from our member base. And most people sign up at Equinox because they know something has to change in their life, even though they might not know exactly what needs to change, but they have the time and the resources to invest in themselves for long enough to discover it. The hard part is most of the members there never actually achieve their goals. They stopped attending the facility within 90 days of joining. And even though Equinox has a high culture of performance using science-based programs to try and avoid common overuse injuries, they often persisted. The interesting part about that is that most of the members don't hurt themselves with improper form or over-ambitious loads, although those do happen, and I'm guilty of doing those to myself for sure. It's often more about what's happening outside of the gym. Their lack of sleep or long hours, demanding jobs, high expectations, they all take their toll on your ability to recover from stress. And as a species, we're really good at handling acute stressors, those kind of one and done events. We use our physiology, social networks like this to diffuse our stress and then move on. Zebras don't get ulcers because their stressors are exactly that, one and done. They either run and they're good, or they don't run fast enough and it's done. But our stressors are typically ongoing. They become chronic. And the longer that those stressors remain, the more traumatic they become. When performance suffers in the gym, we call it overtraining. And when performance suffers in the workplace, we call it burnout. Often physical injuries are a result of ongoing psychological stressors that most people face in their personal and professional lives. When you add in physical training into an already stressed system, that pain and injury is bound to happen. Even though people can get high from running or endorphins from lifting and cardiovascular health is beneficial, all of those activities are stressors as well. And when you don't have the capacity to recover, that's when we deteriorate. I was tired of seeing passionate people with the time and the money to invest themselves fail and leave the gym. And I was responsible for a team of providers who had the passion and skill that those people needed. Even though no one at Equinox is 1099, if you're not with a client, your hourly rate is the bare minimum, which makes it super hard to pay rent and student loans as well as eat. So the Equinox is this bit of a feeling that they've done the heavy lifting as a company. They've collected all these people that are driven and can afford the time and the money to get results. Put them all in a room in the same place at the same time. And so as a trainer or massage therapist, it's your job to show them the value of what you can offer with your expertise. And during my first few years there, I saw a lot of providers that were smart, passionate, and driven leave that company because they couldn't figure out how to turn their passion into a profitable career. And I was tired of that. It was really sad to see people come and go, good friends, smart people that really cared, that had developed really loving, passionate relationships with their members. And so I was determined to try to fix that. It drove me. I had bad past experiences personally, both as an overtrained, burned out member. I've always been on the table well before I've been a practitioner on the other side of it. And so I'd also been a provider in that environment, struggling to turn that into a profitable career. And I knew that that obstacle could be fixed. You have these millionaires and these people that need help, and they're right there, and we just have to reach out and touch them and have that conversation. And teaching people how to facilitate that conversation was really fun for me. I got out of bed every day knowing that the effort I was making mattered. So every day I got up, I went to the computer, I ran the stats on every single one of my team members. And the ones that weren't making a paycheck or a living wage, I met with them. We met like this virtually through Zoom or over the phone or text message. And we met in person. So we kept meeting every single day until every single shift of every single day that they worked anyway, until they made a paycheck that they were proud of. So after that work, I started getting these emails from some of these providers, from our members, where they were sharing stories about how their lives were changing from the support that these therapists had on them, how their back pain was gone, and how they were able to play with their grandchildren again. And a lot of these providers didn't realize the impact they're having on their members' lives. And so we started sharing these across the region. And as we started sharing them, other people were hearing them, and they started sharing them again. So every day now in those emails, we'd wake up and get a bunch of those. And it was addictive. Our P&Ls looked good. Our growth numbers year over year were in the double digits. And people were really proud of the work they were doing. It was interesting because I had locations down in San Diego, like we've had some people join the call, and then up on the west side of LA. And there were a lot of early mornings and long hours in the car. But when that alarm got up or went off, I got up. It was easy knowing that today I was going to help someone turn their passion into a career. And that career was then helping other people feel and perform better. My counterpart for the personal training department had been with the company for 20 years, starting out as a trainer, and worked his way up just like I had. This is, by the way, not a picture of him. This is just a nice little photoshopped image. This guy was a big guy, 6'2", 230, mostly muscle. He's a seasoned veteran of the company. He'd seen the company grow over those 20 years he'd been there, from 5 locations to 180. So he'd seen all of those challenges that come from growing at a rapid rate, maintaining culture and standards. It's challenging. It's finding the right people to do jobs that really care. And I admired him because he was doing it. I thought he was like fulfilling the dream, right? That dream of me as a little 15-year-old kid. He was stern and kind. He cared about his team. Everyone in his departments respected him. And his son worked at the front desk at one of the locations, and his wife also worked for the company teaching classes. And he fought really hard to ensure that his production numbers were good. And he had a nice enough car to prove that he was doing it well. It wasn't my dream car when I was a kid, the Acura Integra GSR, but that was just for me. So, meanwhile, I had stopped my own workout routine due to back pain. But the long drives and those early mornings were adding up. But we were opening new locations, 2 or 3 new ones in that same time frame that I was responsible for. And we were still beating last year's numbers, which meant more people were turning their passion into a career. But something happened where my entire world just became about the people that were there at work. My team, my managers, my colleagues. It was kind of isolating because it was so in it all the time that when you weren't talking to people at work, it was like a whole different language. Like you had a shorthand with people. And so my significant other felt less of my passion at home. She felt like the work was getting the best of me, and she was only given the leftovers. Sorry for teasing you all with donuts here, but she was right. If I had written down 10 things I cared about that day, week, or month, or year, it would have only been about my team or my department. Nothing outside of work seemed to matter anymore. And in the entrepreneurial world, just like in athletics, that obsession is revered. That hustle and grind mindset reigns supreme. The I'll sleep when I'm dead and too blessed to be stressed kind of memes are all over the place. And that Kool-AID is super killer. So I continued on, secure that I was going to be okay. I'd figure it out, that I was lucky, that so many people had it way worse than I did. And how could this be a bad thing? It was everything I'd ever wished for. I worked in an industry that I loved, doing work I loved with people I loved, helping people out. And I had like a nice title that both of my dads were proud of, 5 years younger than when they earned that title for themselves. So I was like, no, this is okay. I can figure this out. And it was then that my partner Equinox, that my colleague that was on the PT side, he was just gone. I was walking around the clubs and I thought maybe I'd missed him and we were missing each other on those days. And then I heard that he was let go from a couple of the different managers there. And there was no explanation why or what happened. His department was doing really well. He didn't have any issues with HR. He was just gone. And his team and I were still kind of in shock, but we kept moving, kept doing the job. And within a couple of weeks, someone else was promoted into that position. They closed out the applications and it was filled and we moved on. And meanwhile, my own health was deteriorating, my relationship even more so. We had started couples counseling to work on the issue, but it was about 4 weeks later that the team got news that my colleague had actually taken his own life after he'd been fired. It was a shock to everyone. He'd really given himself so much of himself and his identity to the company for so long that without that title, he wasn't sure if there was really anything left. Usually we think of purpose as a positive, but when your whole identity becomes tied to one's expression of purpose, and then that's taken from you, it's really easy to see how someone could lose their way. Disheartened that all of their sacrifices and struggles that they made day in and day out only ended up in that moment, a moment that's completely out of their control, that there's nothing they could do. That sense of purpose just being ripped away from them despite all their efforts. At that point, I could ignore my back pain. I could ignore my own sleep deprivation, my high blood pressure, the insulin resistance that had started because of the stress, my own personal weight gain, my loss of strength. I chose to ignore what was behind the need for my couples counseling, but I couldn't ignore my colleague's death. It was a serious wake-up call because I saw what that would look like, keeping down that road, getting sucked into that culture and just staying in there, too blessed to be stressed, I'll sleep when I'm dead mentality. And I saw where it ends up, so I quit. And I realized then that fulfilling the dream it's not enough. There's more to purpose than just a title or a position, even if that title and that position are in your passion and you do get paid well for it. We see these scenarios play out in all types of fields. There's athletes who spend every minute of every hour of every day for decades devoted to their sport that have taken them from them in a millisecond by an injury. Or there's soldiers returning home unable to connect with a purpose off of the battlefield. Or there's parents that now struggle to find meaning after their children leave their homes. Significant others struggling to make a purpose without their other half. And yet most of us carry on, and a few of us actually even seem to continue to thrive despite these upsets to their identity. In college, one of my best friends was recruited to play D1 soccer. And at that point, he'd already had 2 operations on his knee. During his sophomore year, preseason game, he sustained another injury and his knee blew out again. So he was going to have another surgery. And this is all before his 21st birthday. He was super concerned that he was not going to be able to get a scholarship that next year. And so for him to continue working on his degree, he would have to figure out a way to afford tuition. He's a brilliant man. He's probably the smartest guy I've ever hung out with. And so he decided to help write and edit graduate papers for graduate students with their thesis. So he became an editor and a tutor for them. And he was still required to attend all the practices and travels for the games. So between both of those, it was really hard for him to keep up with going to classes. And at the end of the season, he was super surprised when the coaches came to him and offered him the continuing of the scholarship by keeping him on as an assistant coach instead of a player. But he was so busy helping those other students with their coursework that he'd been neglecting his own, and his GPA suffered. So one of the smartest people I'd ever known was ineligible for a scholarship because of his GPA. And that was rough, because without his identity as a soccer player or as a student, he was super hurting, and he wasn't who he was anymore. And looking for a way of coping with that, or looking for some relief from that, he ended up finding it in some illicit substances, and those definitely carried a set of their own consequences. And he left college, left our college town, moved back home. And when I invited him to be the best man at my wedding, he didn't show up. He was out on a bender and didn't make it. So he's doing better now, but that loss of identity at a young age is still stuck with him now, 15 years later. And so there are populations that are at greater risk. If your purpose is tied to your identity and you lose your purpose, you're in trouble. Or if your identity is tied to your purpose and you lose that, you're in trouble. Police officers are in a lot of that population. They identify themselves as strong cops, and then they get out there and they sustain injuries on the job, and they get moved to desk jobs. And that sudden shift that's out of their control threatens their identity and calls into question that purpose. It's really challenging to handle that. And the more your identity is attached to the purpose, the more susceptible you are. When you're attached to an identity, anything that threatens your identity feels like a personal threat to you. Your physiology responds instantly. You react with anger or anxiety or anxiousness. And when that threat remains constant, or it happens more frequently than you can recover from, then you're consistently bathed in the chemicals of those stress hormones. And the longer you linger sitting in that state, the faster your ability to cope deteriorates. All of that overtraining in the gym and the burnout at corporate is driven by these threats to your identity, which tie to that rigid attachment to your purpose. And while we may get results in the very short run, over our lifespan, that attachment isn't sustainable. You'll break, burn out, and so you can no longer go on. So how do you avoid those scenarios? How do you ensure that your identity does not cost you your purpose? The answer is pretty simple. It's to diversify your expression of purpose. It can't just be a title. It can't just be a position. You have to broaden that sense of your identity. So yes, maybe you are a parent, right? Maybe you are a significant other or a sibling, but that's not all of who you are. You might be an athlete, but that's not all of who you are. You might be an entrepreneur, but that's not all who you are. You may be an artist, but who else are you? And the longer the list of identities you have, the more resilient you become. You cannot really control so much of what happens to you: a change of employment, loss of a family member, loss of your ability to perform. But the more facets you have to your identity, the greater and deeper your purpose is, and the simpler and the easier it is to ride the waves of change. So, quick little exercise. Times like these are always nice to take a moment to reflect. So you can make a list of all your titles and positions, or every identity that you currently have or want to have, and don't stop until you have at least 10. And then you can go through each and every one of those identities and ask these 4 questions sequentially. This is the 4 whys exercise that I used in a lot of my coaching with my team. When you're passionate and you're trying to turn that passion into your career, and that alarm goes off and you had a bad day the day before, you have to have that purpose on tap so you know why you're getting out of bed. It makes it much easier. You still have to have coffee to go with it, I think, depending on how early that alarm goes off and how late you are up watching trash TV. But the 4 whys, and there's no particular order. Whatever flows naturally comes. So if this is a journaling exercise, awesome. So why is this important to me? Why does it matter? Why do I care so much? And why is that important? And it sounds like some of those questions are repeating themselves, but you're asking each question in response to the answer from the previous question. So I'll give you a little example. This is a real life example of a client that I've worked with. It was actually one of my first clients. So like 13 years ago, and it stuck with me for so long because it just shocked me. Like this simple goal of like, okay, why are we doing this goal was tied to something so important that I just kind of stuck with me for a long time. And so I want to share that with you. After being in gym culture for so long, like I used to just hear people talk about like their goals, and often weight loss is a common one. So this is really a conversation that I went through with this person. Why is it important for you to lose weight? The answer was, I'm type 2 diabetic and I want to be healthy. Why do you care? The answer was, because I have a little girl and I want to be there for her. And the next why was, why does that matter? Because I grew up without my father, and I don't want that for my daughter. And in that scenario, we only had to use 3 of the 4 whys to get to that emotional center where purpose is found. And every economist and every salesperson knows that we act out of emotions. When we have an emotional connection to our purpose, it makes it easier to act. That person was actually able to go on and stabilize their blood sugar through an active lifestyle. But that definitely included lots and lots of time being active with his daughter. And so when you look at the identities on your list and you go through and ask yourself the 4 whys, you'll begin to see this overlap and the common themes that come out from it. And if you aren't like crying by that 4th why, maybe that identity isn't important to maintain as some of the other ones. But either way, you're creating an opportunity to be intentional about knowing the underlying reasons behind each and every one of your identities. And you're closer to the purpose at the center of all of them. And having that perspective of purpose creates a resiliency that doesn't falter even when the unexpected happens. You can continue to navigate with purpose. Threats to your identity shift instead into challenges. And your stress response is more infrequent and less intense. And you're able to get back to a regulated physiological state sooner and recover faster, which means you can adapt quicker and respond to challenges with less of a burden and actually enjoy those challenges more. But best of all, when that alarm goes off, you know why you're getting out of bed after you've done some of these exercises.
Thank you for sharing. I'm really actually excited to get into the Q&A portion of this. I think we're all kind of in a really interesting space, like given the pandemic that we're living in, right? And when you were chatting, what struck me, like, I guess my first question, at first I want to just kind of lay this out for you guys. Put your questions in the chat, and then I'll like call you out, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question, because I want you to be able to like engage and to be able to interact. I just don't want all of those background noises. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. And yes, we did record it, and we will share it with you guys after for the people that are asking. But so my question for you, Garrett, to start, and this is interesting because Austin and I were literally just talking about this a couple of days ago. So you're saying that each of our identities have their own purpose.
Yeah, there may be overlap. Hopefully, when you get to the end of those 4th whys, where you end up has some overlap on like a little Venn diagram with some of your other identities. But each identity has its own purpose for sure. It stems from a motivation that's common, but if I'm going to be a good father, why I'm doing that is definitely going to come sometimes in conflict with delivering on other identities' responsibilities, right? So some of us are in a situation now where you have to take a call and be present for your team, but then you also have to be present for your family that's right there with you. And now how do you deliver on both of those purposes that there's this conflict? And so that can be challenging to navigate for a lot of people, especially when we're navigating our other identities' purposes at the same time. So trying to figure out how to navigate that and make sure you overlap. A lot of people have this feeling of like failure because they're not living up to their own expectations of themselves. So they feel like they're an imposter, essentially, because they're not delivering on this identity and this identity and this identity. They're only able to deliver on one at a time. And that can be kind of overwhelming for people. And so with this, it kind of gives you a chance to give yourself a bit of a break and look for what's at the center. And as long as you're delivering on that consistently, then it makes it much easier to navigate.
So I have a question. I am someone who wears many hats, both personally and professionally. So when you said that the more you diversify your identities, the easier it is to ride out waves of change, that really resonated with me. But sometimes I feel like I am jack of all trades, master of none. Like I do so many different things. I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a writer, I'm a marketing consultant, and that can be really overwhelming sometimes. So do you have any clarity on that or advice?
Yeah, great question. Not to add another thing to your to-do list, because it sounds like it's pretty full. But I mentioned David Epstein's book, Range, because there's a lot of people that are like, oh man, I wish I was just like, an Olympic gymnast, because that's all you do all day. If I could just focus on one thing forever, I'd be so good at that. And when you wear those multiple hats, you actually see the potential of what you could be doing, and then realize how you're not delivering on it. And then we're focused on that gap in performance so much that we miss the benefit of like realizing that being a jack of all trades actually has a real benefit. So in that book, Range, there's kind of like an emotional defense for that position. So I would take a look at that. I wish I had written it so that way I could be plugging my own book, but that's okay. But when you have multiple hats to wear, it is really about like creating a to-do list and then crossing off like, okay, what do I hate to do? What am I not going to do? And then making yourself have space for that in there and not over-committing to things that you can't make it on there, and making sure that you're a priority in your own life. Because when you make your to-do list of things, you're only thinking about your intent. If you don't add space in there for other people's intent for you that day, you kind of get in trouble where you're overwhelmed. So in there, if you have a team that reports to you or a family that you need to help support, if you don't leave like a 3-hour chunk in the middle of your day for those things that come up, you're going to get overwhelmed really quickly.
If you're clear on your purpose, but you don't have the capital to start your own brand or business, and you're not in a position to, I'm curious about how you navigate the waters. I think Becky may know us well. I've been through a rash the last 4 years where I'm settled on my purpose. I know it's to edify groups and individuals, to amplify brands and cultivate engagement. I'm very clear on that. It aligns with my personal purpose as well. But through no fault of my own, I've been through a rash of layoffs. Like I come to a company, I'm kind of a fixer, and then they have a big company-wide thing and get laid off. And it keeps happening. And it is disheartening, but how do you navigate that? You're not in a position to start your own thing. You need the security of company benefits and all of that. But when you know your purpose and it feels like it doesn't fit into what, cookie cutter molds or companies, how do you navigate that?
That's a really tough question. And I love the word that you use in there, security. Because to be able to brave the wilderness of starting out on your own, you do have to have an income, right? And you have to have your bills paid. And if you have a family, you have to provide for them too. So that's a lot to navigate. There's this interesting aspect though, where you can start on your own in some regards, because if you're clear on your purpose and you know what needs to happen and you have a deliverable model to get that out there, then it's just a matter of time. So whether that's 2 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, or 20 minutes a day, it does add up over time. And because you're giving yourself that length of time, that idea can continue to evolve. And so that finished product is much better the first time around than it would be if you had all the resources and you just put it out there. Because there's going to be this process of evolution that comes from any idea, any business. There's tons of iterations. And so if you take 10 minutes a day to work on it, and you have that little bit of an iteration, and that's only once a week, by the time you finish out that full project, you've already gone through that iteration process organically without spending a lot of money. And so I think there is benefits to having to go that route, even though it can be a little hard to like always feel like you're pulling against something that's outside of your control. but it's definitely worth the effort, and it's definitely worth the time. And to your point that you won't be able to go out there in the world and probably find the perfect fit for yourself. And even when you're close to it and getting as close as you can, where you're like, I don't feel like I'm actually compromising anymore. This is enough of what I want from this external company that gives me what I need to do the work. There's still not necessarily security with that, which you've obviously seen multiple times and recently. And so working on this project on the end, in the meantime, is a nice way to give yourself some hope for the future of that. And just know that the time and energy you put in will eventually pay off. And you have to do that whether you're doing it all at once or not. It was funny. Facebook reminded me yesterday that it's actually 2 years to the day that I quit that company when I walked out the door, which I thought was really super wild. I don't know what that means, but that's cool. Anyway, I really didn't exactly know what I was going to be doing in my business until essentially 6 months ago. And so I spent a lot of time and energy and money doing iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration. And I wish I had all those resources back, because I'd be able to do so much more with them now. So if I could go back and do it again, maybe I wouldn't quit. Maybe I would emotionally quit, still get the job done, but it wouldn't be my sole source of inspiration. And I would have stuck it out for a little bit longer and been able to, instead of doing that iteration and spending that money myself and trial and error, would have had that support of that job in the meantime.
So my question for you is, when you have, 18 different identities and you express your why in different ways, do you have any tips for ensuring that this particular expression of your identity is in alignment with that core why? So you could have, for example, I've been in the same job for 14 years and I was absolutely not aligned with it in the beginning. And only more recently am I more aligned with that purpose, because the types of services I'm doing within that company are more in alignment with that core. And it took me 14 years. So do you have any tips for everybody on here on how to speed that up and get a little better feedback?
Yeah, speeding up. Yeah. There's no hurry. You'll figure it out, right? It's fine. It's worth the effort. You're worth the effort. Doesn't matter how long it takes. Van Gogh was like one of my favorites. There's like a really cool story about him. He was a pastor for a while, or, a priest, I guess. And his supervisor came to him and was like, yo, you are a quality person, but you are terrible at this job. I'm not worried about what you end up doing, because whatever you end up doing, you're going to be phenomenal at. But right here and right now, this is not for you. Right. And so he actually had that freedom to leave and move on to something else, which was great for all of us that enjoy his work. So don't worry about the time necessarily, but if you are wanting to make sure, okay, what is it about this position that is feeding me and is aligned with it? You can look back. I mentioned the 27 years and the 20 titles in those years. I realized what I was doing every single day with that stuff, the highlight of that day, the thing that I wouldn't change for anything else, that I was surprised that I got paid to do. And if I just did that every day, it would be worthwhile, was having conversations with people, was having those types of conversations I shared with the 4 whys, where people were getting really vulnerable and sharing what was actually motivating them behind what was going on. It wasn't these surface level ideas or strategies of P&L statements. It wasn't, business strategy sessions necessarily. Although those were fun, it was, why are we doing this? And when people got vulnerable and I was able to share that vulnerability with them, that was really special moments that I would never trade for anything. And those were consistent across the positions I was in. I bartended through college. And I couldn't even tell you how many stories that came out from those people. After their 5th drink, these men would just finally shed their masculinity and get down to being a real person that admitted that they didn't have it figured out, and that, they were worried about their own insecurities as being a father or the breadwinner. And it took 6 beers or shots or, whatever to get them there. And so I didn't like pouring the drinks or, swilling the mats, cleaning out the kegerators at the end of the night. But it was those conversations that I did have. So now I'm in a position where I get to have those conversations. And so I think if you look at, what did I enjoy that day about my job or my position? And why did I like that? And then you kind of go through those 4 whys again. It'll get you to really close to that purpose. And if you do that as an exercise once a week or once a month, that would probably help you fast forward to getting closer to that alignment. And it would probably align you better with what you're best at the job. Because if you're motivated or you care about something, you're in a better position to do it than anybody else. And so you might be giving more of yourself to that position and the company getting more from it too, which, might help you get promoted or a raise, or I don't know, at least enjoy the position while you're there.
Garrett, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this morning. It's been really interesting. So I guess I'll just get straight to my question, which is, once you've kind of done that exercise and you've kind of figured out what the multiple roles are, identities, I think the next step is, if you're going to implement it, you're going to have to set up some boundaries and expectations with people who may be used to having you perform a certain way, and expectations. So what are some of the suggestions you have to handling that? Thank you.
So navigating those conversations about okay, things are going to change now.
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Having strong boundaries for yourself is pretty rough. So one of the hardest things that happened when I quit is I grew up where, making money was super important. I studied some investment banking. I got coffee for investment bankers for a while because I thought all right, if I have money, all the problems for my house will be fixed. This is great. I was also pouring them cocktails at night. So I got them on both ends of it. Right. And this is pre-2008. So it was a pretty wild ride. But all of those people had a lot, not all of them. The predominant culture when I was there that I observed, those people were not happy. They had everything that I thought I ever needed growing up that would make me happy, and they were not. And arguably, they were more miserable than the house I grew up in. So that was when I first realized, okay, this is not okay. And so I was lucky enough when I was at Equinox, I was getting paid really well. I was pretty young for the position that I had and the salary that I had. And I felt really grateful for that. And it kept me there for a very long time, despite all the stuff I was going through personally. And I had to sit there and be okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to say goodbye to this income. And I have nowhere to go. I have no safe landing. I have no parachute. There's no retirement. Luckily I don't have pre-existing health conditions, so I didn't have to worry about some of these concerns. But I didn't tell either of my two dads because I knew that they would be you're crazy. What are you doing? You cannot do that. No, stop. That's not okay. It's not all right. You have to stay in that job. And so I didn't tell them, but I did make an announcement on LinkedIn, and they both liked it, which was kind of fun. 6 weeks later, they both were good job, or whatever. So we ended up having conversations about it. And that conversation was, when they shared it, I was so nervous to have this conversation. My heart was pounding as we were talking. And one of them was I had a partner come to me and he said he had an investment deal and he offered to have me buy in with him. And I said no, because I didn't know how that was going to go. And I felt safe and secure in the position. And I didn't say yes to that. And then my other dad had a very similar conversation where he had a business opportunity that he said no to, and then stayed with a secure position. And so it wasn't until after I had made this jump that I started having that conversation, and I didn't even initiate it. So I'm terrible at this. So don't take my advice. But I was so amazed that after getting on that other side, they willfully shared their experience. And so sometimes when we're concerned about maintaining boundaries or changing expectations with other people, it actually is because we have a false assumption of what other people are going to think or say. And we're projecting that onto them. And so it creates a bigger divide between there. And so having open and honest conversations, it's really tough. It's not easy. But if you can kind of stay centered, stay regulated, and just throw it out there and say things need to change. And the specifics of that conversation, I think you're probably more interested in how do you have the actual words and what do you use and how can you practice that? I would write it down, what your likes are, what your dislikes are, and what you think are solutions to see that change. And then when you go into that conversation, you can say, hey, are you 100% satisfied with how things are right now? If you could change anything, what would it be? And then you've opened that conversation and you've actually given them the space to start having some of that conversation. And then you can interject or season in, sprinkle in your versions of those likes and dislikes and wants and desires as well. Because most people are not 100% satisfied with any situation on both sides of those parties. And you might be surprised about where that conversation goes.
So my question is more about like when going through those identities, like a lot of them are very different. Like I'm learning how to code right now, but for most of my life, I've been an actor and a performer. So I guess navigating those different identities and them feeling valid at the same time, like how you navigate that.
So the question there is about feeling valid, right?
That and them also both feeling like they can exist in the same space.
Yeah. I'm going to plug that book again. It's called Range, R-A-N-G-E. Sorry. We are multifaceted people, right? Just because you might be making money or known for something doesn't mean that's all you are. Oftentimes in public spheres, right, like acting, you cultivate a personality. You know, Ryan Reynolds is hilarious, but he's always Ryan Reynolds no matter where he is, whether it's in a movie, whether he's in a movie where he's in a coffin for an hour and a half and nothing else cuts away from that movie, or whether he's on ESPN, or whether he's on ETV, or whether he's on the internet talking trash about other celebrities in the most hilarious way. He's still himself, but I don't think that's who he is when he's at home with his kids. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's other facets of it. So just because you only see other people presenting themselves as one way doesn't mean that's who they are. Like, I always wear this blazer and a t-shirt when I'm out and about. I wear it at home when I'm seeing clients because it gives them consistency of who I am. I think we all remember seeing our teacher outside of school for the first time and being like, oh, what? You're a person? You go to Walmart or Target or Whole Foods, whoever you are. I don't know what district you teach in. But remembering that like people are people, and just because we only see them one way doesn't mean that's all they are. And I think when you look around and you see other people, you don't see all the other facets that they're bringing or not showing you at that time. And so it's valid for you to have very different personalities. Coding and acting could not be more dissimilar in my mind. One's very private, you in front of a screen with no human interaction, no necessary emotion expression on the face. And then the other one's all about emoting and performing in front of people. But there is some overlap there where one, it's both about performance and it's all internally driven. And it's about you creating an influence and an impact on those around you. And so what type of impact you want to have or how you want to have that impact, that's the common overlap that I can see from way over here in Zoom land, just off the top of my head. And looking for that opportunity where it overlaps and seeing that consistent theme for all of them, I promise you, after you list those 4 whys to yourself of each one of those identities, it'll be super easy to see what the values are that drive that. If I go back to like a weight loss example, and you know, there's lots of ways to lose weight. You could cut off your leg, boom, instant change to the scale. But I don't know if you want to be like, you know, having one less limb, like that's not great, right? Like that's not the point of why we're trying to lose weight. There's something that's missing. Like it is a solution and it does work according to the metric, but it's not a true answer. You could go on a Twinkie diet and that would work too. If you only had like 2 or 3 Twinkies a day, that would get results. In the short run, in the long run, you'd probably be wildly nutrient deficient and probably have some serious metabolic issues, but the scale would be different. So if none of those are solid answers, then the answer comes down, okay, well, what would be an answer? And if you know what your purpose is and you know why you actually have that goal or that identity, it makes it really easy to understand how to express it.
Can I kind of echo off that for a second? My question based off of what everybody else has been asking too is, what if like you don't know like what those identities are, right? So for example, I'll just use like my life as an example, right? Like, so I have this, like I've always been really ambitious and like I've always wanted to do this notion of like succeeding, but you're like, okay, what is success for me versus like what is success for everybody? And so if I don't know what my identities are, right? Like, is that, you know, do I want to be a CEO? Like, do I want to be a weightlifter, you know, all 3 feet of me? Do I want to like continue connecting these people through Creative Mornings Orange County, right? Like, so what I struggle with in finding my purpose is like, I don't even know what those identities are. I don't even know where to start, right? I think I'm kind of burning that like oil like everybody else is with that hustle right now, right? It's just like, just grind and grind and grind and put your nose down. And then whatever's meant to happen will like show up right? And so really being able to try to get to the bottom of that, like, why are you grinding so hard? I don't know, right? Because it's what my mom and dad told me to do, because I want to have a roof over my head. Like, what if you don't know how to identify them?
You got to have a roof over your head, right? The size of that roof can vary, right? I had a lady share her secrets about how she coaches her clients through like stressful situations. And she was like, she used this analogy. She's like, you know, in your house, how, and I was like, I have an apartment. She's like, but in the house, there's the room that like has all the stuff in it and you just throw it in the room and shut the door. And I was like, I don't have a whole room like that. That's not great. I have a drawer like that where stuff's in there and not. And so the size of your roof doesn't matter as long as you have one, right? But there's something about performance. Like as a CEO, what are you doing? Why would you want to be a CEO? Why is that important to you? Why does that matter? Okay, as a weightlifter, having relatively long arms and being close to the center of the ground is perfect for power clean snatches, clean and jerks. So you might have a genetic advantage than other people would. But if you don't enjoy it, why are you doing it, right? If you do enjoy it, then keep doing what you enjoy. And there might be some commonality there because maybe the people in the weight room need to be connected like this virtually. I don't know, right? There is an overlap between all of his identities. Grinding and paying your bills, completely different than delivering on purpose, because you have to have your bills paid for you to be able to have enough space to operate, to feel safe enough and secure enough to actually think about what the purpose is and deliver it in an intentional way. Because there's a difference between doing something intentionally and doing something because you have to grind through to get it done. And one's not better than the other. They are both required. But if you have a drunk drawer instead of a drunk room, you don't have to hustle as much or grind as hard. You know, this is Orange County, so it's kind of expensive to live here. We could all be in like Nashville or Oregon for that matter. Don't move there. They'll hate you for moving up there. But there are ways to be more cost effective. You know, you could have 20 roommates. I remember hearing on NPR that there was a house in West LA that had 27 roommates in a 5-bedroom because they were all actors. And this thing hit and they were like, oh no. And so everyone just scattered back. Yeah. So I don't want to live that way, right? So that's the other part too, is choosing like short-term, long-term, middle term. And as long as you're enjoying it and you can sustain whatever your life looks like for a year, then you're probably okay. But if what your week looked like, you couldn't do it again and again and again for 52 weeks, you're hitting that grind meter way too hard. So you got to look around and see what you can scale back. Maybe you need a smaller roof. Maybe you need another roommate in that roof. Maybe Portland Star does look better. We're not trapped in this world, right? You know, you can go to Bali as long as you have a nice Wi-Fi connection and you have remote work. Your cost of living drops down to next to nothing. It's pretty nice. We're pretty privileged here in this first world that we have opportunities to kind of diversify like that.
Yeah. Awesome. So it is 9:30. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can stay out and hang with us virtually if you want. Totally up to you. But thank you all so much. And thank you, Garrett, for coming to our first virtual event. I really, really enjoyed it. I really appreciate all of your guys' kind of engagement and questions and just getting like open and vulnerable with us as a community. It's amazing how much you guys show up every single time, whether it's a virtual event or an in-person event. Orange County is strong, and I couldn't be prouder of you guys. So just thank you for showing up. And if you want to hang, feel free to hang. If not, have a wonderful day. Maria's asking me to plug the social. Go follow us at CM_Orange County. But yeah, just definitely message us if you guys, want to chat anything further. Like, we're always here for you guys. And hopefully next month we can meet in person. So thank you guys. And thank you again, Garrett. Appreciate it.